It looks like we're live. Hello. Looks like in
Hello,
the
everyone.
house we have Vera Tariel, King Gibson. Hi, Vera Faith. How are you doing? And Linda just came in. And we're expecting a few other people. I'm hoping Mariel McKenzie, and there was a couple of other people that I thought might make it today. Maybe Jennifer, maybe Esther,
Yeah, why don't we let
maybe
it go till at least 5 after to make sure everybody gets in?
yeah. Oh, Sarah Wall. Yes. Hey, that's one of the other ones that I thought might make it today.
Mhm.
Awesome. Yay. And happy Eclipse Day. Okay. We have Moron Virese, which is the Elven Dark Moon of Youth with Tulkas. And literally tomorrow by the new calendar, it'll be changing the month to Lotese. So our Quaron is actually Quaron Lotese, so it's the next month. But what's really cool is that Tulkas and Nessa are married. They're a couple, so it kind of flows together pretty well. Um, so Dave, I'm gonna have you like since we've got some people in the house. I may wait like a couple more minutes.
Mhm.
I'll have you do your introduction.
Right. Okay.
Before I do that, though, I did want to tell our people what's kind of going on. And we had a board meeting a couple weeks ago, and we got a lot of stuff discussed and lots of progress made this year. Just letting you guys know, but we have lots of upping the ante to do. And so one of those things that was suggested by a couple of our if Echo's in the room, that'd be great. But Echo was one of the more, you know, enthusiastic proponents of this to create a social hour or social 90 minutes maybe we bought a Google Meet way for people to interact. And so you don't have to download an app. You can just actually click the link. If you have a Google account, you're in. And I think that you could even do it without a Google account. I'm not really sure, but it seems to be working really well for meetings and other things. And I'm pretty pleased with that. Astrofel. Oh, it's Astro Kid, my Govanen, and happy Beltane and happy solar eclipse. How are you doing? Glad to see you. Excellent. So, you know what? We'll go ahead and get started, Dave. So I did want to talk to several of you about the social hour. I think we're going to implement that in June, but we're going to do a two-part video this time because I'm going to be moving yet again. Yeah, I know. Guilty. I'm going to be moving again in May, and then by June, I'm going to be cat sitting in Arizona. Then I'm going to be like either pet sitting, cat sitting, house sitting, stuff like that in July, August in Southern California, most likely. September, I come back up here to Montana, which is where I'm at right now. And I just had completed my pet sitting, plant sitting, house sitting, all of the stuff. And I come back here in September to do that again for like a lot of the month. And then in October through December, I may be in Ireland. So just so that you guys know, like it depends on, like the flight requirements. I'm not going to get the vaccine. So if that is the case, I'm going to back out. Okay. But if there's a way to go across the pond without having a vaccine, I'm going to try it. Mariel made it. Yay. Hi, Mariel. So we're going to have the meeting, our first social meeting in June. But meanwhile, I did want to tell you guys that we're handling a lot of things behind the scenes. And one of them is Dakyndre has taken it upon himself to like go over the old bylaws, and we're all rewriting them. Like he's having some suggestions, and we are going to be like going over all of the bylaws things and actually having them like be a better document when we're done. So that I'm looking forward to. We're getting slowly but surely all of our admin done. We got our physical mailing address secured today. for the year 2022. We have like, I don't know, just a whole bunch of things like in the works. We're looking at libraries. We're looking at writing books. Yes, I know that's been on the table too. We might speed that up right now. We might move that up the ranks. So we'll have a real meeting for you guys later on all of the things that we discussed in the meeting, because I'm still typing up the minutes. But so you know what? Without further ado, I think we've got a full house. Dave, I want you to take it away. Our Tia Eldoleva, lore master of the Legendarium.
Okay, I'm going to give, before I start with the presentation of the paper that I wrote, I'm going to, well, actually, with regard to the paper, this is the public portion of the paper. What I did was I wrote an entire research paper, and then Lisa said, well, this is original research, so you may want to present that to our patrons. So what I did was I wrote the entire research paper, and then I redacted part of it with my original research, and this is going to be the attested stars within the Legendarium that are actually mentioned and identified either by Tolkien himself or by some other researchers over the years. So that's what you're going to be receiving today.
Excellent. And by the way, I have it in the screen right now, but if you guys want to download your own copy, there's a link, a bit.ly link that is in the video description down below for you, right, your own copy if you want to have it.
Now, yeah, and it is in the modern Microsoft Word format. If you don't have that, if you have something else, most packages like LibreOffice, for example, will convert it. If it doesn't,
well, Google Docs will probably open it too.
Right. There's also a service called Zamzar that we've used in the past.
Oh, Zamzar. Yeah, I remember them. So, yeah, you could actually convert things to, like, from Word to PDF and all kinds of things. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great app. I like that one.
Now, as I'm presenting the paper, Lisa, I'm going to be looking at the paper and looking at my notes, so you'll have to tell me if somebody has a question or whatever, because I can't look at that part.
I will be switching back and forth, but what I'm going to be doing is scrolling down to make sure that part is viewable in the film, because we have. So what I did was so that the print is bigger and it takes up the whole screen. Our faces down at the bottom, like, I have to scroll just a little bit faster for everybody to be able to read along, but I think it'll be okay. And then I'll be switching back and forth from the screen when I maneuver it to read the comments in StreamYard.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So take it away.
Okay. Now I'm going to do a little introductory comment because I'm a bit different than other people who write or are attracted to Tolkien, because I come out basically out of two different backgrounds. The earlier one is a hard science background, because my father was an aeronautical engineer at Douglas Aircraft Corporation, which doesn't exist anymore. It was consumed by the Boeing Corporation. But nevertheless, I have the background in hard science, and then as I got older, I studied on my own because I was very interested in it. And so I come out of a science background first, and then later there's a shamanic background, and I'm going to go over that a little bit. Basically, what happened was my first exposure to Tolkien was a play that my sister did of The Hobbit when I was 8. And I thought it was a fascinating story, so I asked my mom, could you please get me that book? I want to read more about it. And so that was my first exposure to Tolkien. And then I was always interested in science from the time I can remember going to kindergarten when I was 5 years old and trying to explain the concept of a Venturi to the kindergarten teacher. And I think I did a passable job, but I'm not sure if she entirely got it or not. That's the that's the neck down section in a wind tunnel that increases the flow of the air, so that they can put test models in there and see how the airplane would actually fly under different speed conditions. Anyway, that's my scientific background. Much later, around 30 years later, see, I'm I'm going to be 57 now, so we're talking back a bit.
Yeah, we're
Uh,
old school now.
yeah.
We're old
So
school. We're in our late 50s.
right. So about 30 years later, in other words, when I was about 38 or 39, I started investigating shamanism because I always had inklings that I had that talent, but there was no way to, most traditional societies have a senior shaman that will introduce the initiate to their ways of the whatever. Usually these are tribal cultures. There isn't anything like that in Western cultures. So if you're going to do it and aren't filthy rich, you have to basically figure it out on your own. And my shamanic introduction was through the power plant Salvia divinorum. And right now I'm going to put, I actually have a page that explains what that is, that it's not, the horrible plant that a lot of people online may think. It may be if it's not your ally. Most of these medicine plants, it's either your ally or your enemy. And if it's your enemy, you shouldn't have anything to do with it. But
Yeah.
with me and Salvia divinorum, it's the opposite. So I'm going to post in this first part for Lisa here, and then she can like repost it. There we are. And that's the link to my Salvia divinorum page on Facebook. You don't have to go to any of these links, but in case you're interested in things I'm saying, you can do it. Anyway, what happened was, because I had a science background and then I became shamanic, the fusion, it's like a fusion of cognitive modalities, basically, ways of thinking, ways of viewing the world. So I use the scientific techniques for things that can be measured, like the passage of time or the movement of stars, and shamanic techniques for things that can't, like immersion in the beauty of a painting or a poem, or visions of near future prophetic events. And you don't want to basically use a technique in one realm that's really meant to be used in the other, because it simply won't work. Nothing bad will happen other than that you'll get erroneous information. And that's what I think happens to a lot of people. Since they don't have a science background, they don't understand where the realm of science is appropriate to use and what it's inappropriate to use. I've seen many people in the spiritual realm think that everything can be explained by science. So they say stuff like, quantum mechanics explains consciousness. No, it doesn't at all. And if you want to know why, there's a guy who explains it much better than I can, called Professor Dave Explains, and he has a whole thing on quantum consciousness and all that, and why it isn't valid. Nevertheless, so you have to know when to apply one system and when to apply the other. And let's see here. I'm gonna.
Yes, I pasted it just now.
Right.
I thought you put it in the private chat on StreamYard, but I had closed out the Facebook Messenger window, so I just had to go back and open it, and so I pasted the comment, including your bit.ly link in there, so they have that.
Okay, I'm just about to post another one.
That's okay.
That's up to the point where I was. So, and then the shamanic worldview, the best expression of it that I've come across was a reference I came across just recently. And it's very well expressed by this summary. Shamanism is a tradition of part-time religious specialists who establish and maintain personalistic relations with specific spirit beings through the use of controlled and culturally scripted altered states of consciousness. Shamans employ powers derived from spirits to heal sickness, to guide the dead to their final destinations, to influence animals and the forces of nature in a way that benefits their communities, to initiate assaults on enemies, and to protect their own communities from external aggression, which I think is a very accurate way of putting it, because a lot of people, you'll hear stuff like, oh, you can't use any magical techniques to attack. It's all wrong. But if you're being attacked, you use whatever's available, so, and I'll put that in. And it's shamanism. Shamanism in itself is a technique. It's neither good nor bad. It's how you use it. Just like a hammer, you can use it to hammer a nail. You can also smash somebody's head in with it. It's all about intent. So And that's more on you. That's more than it is
Well
on you.
done.
That is, yeah. So.
Well done. So for some reason, I lost my feed on the Word document. I was sharing it on the screen, and for some reason, it isn't working anymore. So I'm trying to get that back. So that's what I'm doing, you guys. Trying to figure this out. Okay, here we go.
You're probably like showing
Okay,
your
I
desktop.
think that it's back now.
Right.
Let me go back to StreamYard. Yes, it's back. So, and I'm actually getting the rest of your comments because in the live chat, Dave, like you have a lot of material. I have to like do splices of it and only do a little bit at a time.
Right. Well, that's that's
so
what I
that
was.
yeah.
I get it. Well,
Okay.
that's why I'm sending it to you, because on Facebook Messenger doesn't break it
Yeah,
up as much as.
it doesn't have the same issue. That's true.
Right.
So I'm getting the rest of the links.
And after you wait a little bit, then I will.
Okay,
continue.
Astrofel says that they can see it, so that's good.
Okay.
So that's probably means that everybody else can see it too.
Right. Okay.
Paste.
Now the other part to this, the part that I don't speak of that often, but that all the senior TE and also Ivy, my other group, people know, is that I'm a Tiger Therianthrope. Which is basically, if you transliterate the Greek root words, it means animal person. The most familiar folkloric representation is werewolf, but I'm not a werewolf. I'm a Harimojadian, which is a were-tiger. And I have a strong, ever since I was a little kid, I've had a strong attraction to tigers, and the older I got, the more shamanic that became. In fact, that the messages I was receiving from that part of my personality was what got me interested in exploring shamanism in the first place. So, and a lot of people, modern people anyway, have a little bit of confusion. They think that, well, that's a type of otherkin. Well, if you speak to most therianthropes, they don't agree with that assessment. We got, I'll put, I mean, this goes back, we're talking over almost 44,000 years with cave paintings and stuff. So I'm going to put that link here. So I think, 44,000 years gives people like me enough street cred, but
you'd be surprised. I'm still copying the prior links to the messenger, so because I'd have to get them so small, and I'm still spilling over.
Right.
To be honest with you. Paste.
But if we speak of purely the internet era alone, they both Therian. The online expression of therianthropes started with a Usenet. I don't know if many people here have actually used Usenet. It was prior to the World Wide Web. It was a text-based posting that you could do before bulletin boards.
Are you talking about like news groups and newsletters?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, news groups.
Those were great.
There was one that was devoted to horror movies. It was called alt.horror.werewolves, and that's where a lot of Therians first got the exposure. Even though the group wasn't dedicated to that, a lot of Therian people started talking on that, and that was formed in November 16th, 1992. So it's been going, at least the online version has been going at least since then. With regard to the more otherkin sort of thing, the people that identify with fairies and what they know as elves and stuff like that, that was started in 1990 by a student at the University of Kentucky for elves and interested observers, and that was a mailing list. It was called the Elfkind Digest. So that's a little background. And
I'm almost done posting all the material that you just posted.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure that actually maybe people even have some questions about what you've already reviewed. So I'm going to go into the comments.
Okay.
and see if there's some questions for you before we go forward, because that might inspire some questions.
Right. Okay.
So let's see here if the links are working. Okay. Okay, can someone in the audience, I posted, it looks like it separated the word of into the O from the prior comment and then the F to the last comment, but it says storytelling and the earliest figurative art. Does the bit.ly link that is under that, does it link in the live chat replay? If it does, then I'll just leave it alone. And I believe that I've gotten everything now, Dave.
Okay.
Like from the room,
Okay.
you know, for what you typed into Messenger, and I've literally typed, you know, like copied it and pasted it as best as I could into the live chat. Later, you guys, I'm going to place what Dave put into the comments, and both Muriel and Astrophel say that the links work, so that's great.
Okay,
so
great.
we're good with that. But I'll put all of the information in the comments also, so that you guys can refer to it if you're watching the replay and you don't, you know, for whatever reason, either A, the live chat isn't working, or it's too wonky, because it's a little bit wonky right now. I will have it all in the comments for you, and I'll try to pin it to the top if we have a lot of comments on this. So just letting you know. Sarah Wall says, one of the big things that drew me to Tolkien and Tia Aldalieva is that I am Fae. And actually, Sarah, you probably have already seen our video where we discuss the differences between elves and fairy beings. And definitely the fairy beings exist in the Legendarium, but people do like have a tendency to confuse them with elves. Although I do believe that the elves and the beings that we would call fairies were friends on some level, because they were both very interested in nature and, you know, like living within nature. Okay. I would say that the elves might have been like, you know, stewards of the planet in a sense. Elves are the children of Iluvatar, where the other beings were like saying with the Ainur and, you know, before the children of Iluvatar. So there's some differences. Astrophel says, I'm a night elfkin and I was a druid in that life. It was one of the influences on why I practice druidism. Okay, and druidism, to my knowing, is very much of a striving to be within nature's balance as much as you can. And I think that that's great. You know, as above, so below. We have, you know, the earth, and then we have the sky. We have all of the everything about it. So, okay, I think that we caught up on the comments. Let me make sure that I didn't miss any while I was typing in these comments. Okay, where she could see it. Okay, didn't get, okay, I got all the comments. So we are ready to go. Dave, I'm going to switch the screen so you can go ahead and start reading, and I will scroll down and I'll periodically between the two.
Okay, before I start reading the paper, I'm going to do just a little ending section on this. And because of these different factors in my life experience, the science background, shamanism, and being a Dakyndre, sometimes I have difficulty understanding when people come up with and say, you know, a lot of people who are attracted to Tolkien for whatever reason are very elf oriented, and I'm not. I'm the difference between me and a lot of people that, now this is through observation, I don't know this for a fact, but from what I've observed people's behavior, they have a, I suppose, idealized vision of what the elves are, and that's what they're attracted to, and that's what draws them to Tolkien, which is fine. But what I was drawn to Tolkien was not by drawn to the elves or any other beings within the Legendarium. It was that Tolkien had the ability. I'm also on the autism spectrum, so I think visually. I don't think verbally. I have this automatic translation facility within me that can translate my thoughts into English. Back when I was a teenager, I could also speak conversational Spanish, but that's been like 30 years, so that's a bit
Well, I
rusty.
think that says a lot about our inclusivity as well as biodiversity within our group. So.
And what's the reason that I was attracted to Tolkien back when I was 8 years old is he had the ability through verbal description to paint pictures in my mind, which nobody else really had the same talent for that. And so that's the draw that I have to Tolkien's works, is that he paints wonderful pictures in my head. So
yeah,
that's since I've been interested in it since I was 8, this is a long people on the autism spectrum often have what they call special interests. It's a very intense interest. Mine has just lasted basically most of my life, so that's also a little bit different. A lot of people on the autism spectrum change a special interest. Mine just expanded. The Tolkien remained the core, and then I branched out into other stuff. Is basically what happened.
Very good. Very good.
Okay, let's see if there was going to do anything
else.
So
probably what led you to the Legendarium Stars study was, besides your science background, and particularly in this case, astronomy.
Right.
There was a linguistic component, which may or may not be like one of your specialties, but certainly plays a role within how you came up with a lot of things. And what I really like about this work, Dave, and as people are going to see, you sourced a lot of things really well. Like it wasn't just one source. Like you went reaching for, multiple different ways of confirmation with this. And I think that your work, when it comes to the Elvish astronomy, is bar none. I just want to tell you that. I have not seen anybody have such thorough work, except, well, there was one lady who had a really nice, and I forget her name right now, and I feel really bad. She had, and it was close, but you pushed the bar. I just wanted to tell you.
Well, yeah, when I research something, I research it as far as it will go. So, that's whatever. I actually have a name for the process. It's and if you don't know much about advanced mathematics or signal processing, it might not mean much to you. But I say the signal arises from the data. If there's a signal there at all, and it rises above random background noise, I want the actual essence of whatever it happens to be to arise from all the data I have on it itself, rather than me imposing a pre-existing structure. And when you do that, confirmation bias enters in immediately, which is also a problem.
It can. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's not just
and interesting. Muriel McKenzie says that she is autistic too, so she understands that very well. She gets obsessed very easily, she says.
Okay, so cool.
She can relate. So, and I think that all of us, in our own way, maybe not in the way that you do, Dave, because I think that that's unique, but I think that many of us do have a resonance, though, that nobody would be here if Tolkien didn't touch something very deep inside of them that may not have words. That Tolkien, because he was a linguist, like he used words and language the way an art, like Michelangelo shaped art, it's incredible. So, okay, I'm going to go to the document itself and switch so that I can scroll along with Dave and his reading of the document. But I will be switching back so that I can read your comments. So just so that if you guys have one, just go ahead and put it in there, and I'll scroll up and I'll catch your comments, and we'll answer your questions. Okay. So I'm actually surprised that nobody had any questions about what Dave was talking about with his background. So that's awesome. So we'll go ahead and get started with that, Dave, and
Okay.
take it away.
All right. This is the paper, Legendarium Stars and Constellations, a guide. And I'll start the paper. The following citation from the Silmarillion is a primary source which lists most of the stars, stellar asterisms, constellations, and other celestial objects which were important to the Quendi. And this is from the Silmarillion, chapter 3, paragraph 7. Then Varda went forth from the council, and she looked out from the height of Tanaquetil, and beheld the darkness of Middle Earth beneath the innumerable stars, faint and far. Then she began a great labor, greatest of all the works of the Valar since their coming into Arda. She took the silver dews from the vats of Telperion, and therewith she made new stars and brighter against the coming of the firstborn. Wherefore she, whose name out of the deeps of time and the labors of Ea was Tintale, the kindler, was called after by the elves Alantare, queen of the stars. Carnil and Luinil, Nanar and Lumbar, Alcarinque and Elamire she wrought in that time, and many others of the ancient stars she gathered together and set as signs in the heavens of Arda, Wilwaran, Telumendil, Silronume, Anarima, and Menelmakara with his shining belt, that forebodes the last battle that shall be at the end of days. And high in the north, as a challenge to Melkor, she set a crown of 7 mighty stars to swing, Valakirka, the sickle of the Valar, and sign of doom. And there's a table that I made below that lists all of these that are mentioned. And where there's a question mark, that means it's not attested by any source, but you have to figure it out logically. And that's what I've done here. So now the ones that do have a question mark in them, they're in the full paper, but that's in the patrons broadcast. But everything that doesn't have a question mark with it is basically an attested object. And so that's going to be in this paper, with the exception
Excellent.
of now you'll see there, looking at that table, that some of the stars are what we would call planets. But
Yeah.
if you subject the way that the descriptions of stars by the Quenda, you'll see that their primary selection criteria of where something was noticeable was luminosity rather than whether it moved against the background stars or not. So luminosity and noticeability, as a different way of putting it, seem to be their main criteria of where something is of note. So that's, and I will read that a little bit. As one can see, some of those stars, what we would call planets. The explanation for this is that Quendi seem to be mostly concerned with luminosity rather than movement against the background stars. And I know that Lisa asked me recently when I was writing this paper if there were any references to movement, and there isn't, as you'll see in the next few sentences here. This cognitive mode, that is to say, paying attention to brightness rather than movement, may seem odd today, but was not uncommon in antiquity among isolated tribal groups more recently. And I have 3 endnotes for that. First one, when looking at the night sky, they could not differentiate between stars and planets not until telescopes were invented. That's from the Xhosa culture in Africa. Second one, the Babylonians, wait a second here, second one, sorry. Admittedly, the ancient Chinese did not distinguish so clearly between stars and planets as we do today. That's the Chinese culture. And the Babylonians first recorded the appearance of Venus nearly 4,000 years ago. They thought the Venus to be 2 separate bodies, a morning star rising just before sunrise and an evening star setting just after sunset. The ancient Greeks called the morning star Phosphorus and the evening star Hesperus. Around 500 BC, the Greek scientist philosopher Pythagoras recognized that the 2 stars were actually the same body. And all of those and all my endnotes have references. So
yeah, and actually for Western astrology, which was the predecessor of astronomy for the Western world, definitely had a designation that was the planets, and they literally called the other stars the fixed stars because they tended not to move. And then they actually had a name for planets that meant wanderer.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess that it's just culturally, some people cared about the wandering of the stars,
Right.
and others cared more about the actual illumination of the stars
Right.
in the night
Yeah.
sky. Yeah.
My guess is that it was something. It's a different it's a different mode of perception, but it's similar in that, well, you could say, if we're talking about stars, if we're talking about natural objects, well, trees don't move, but birds fly over. But yes, they're
Sure.
birds, so I don't expect anything different.
Right. Yeah.
And this non-differentiation says it's also directly mentioned within a commentary in Morgoth's Ring. In my father's astronomical myth, the planets were never distinguished from the fixed stars, and that's a quote from the end of Morgoth's Ring. For the index and star names, where these names of the stars that I read from the paragraph are actually attested by Christopher Tolkien from his father's notes. So, and I go on. If one takes the remaining three attested stars not mentioned in the Silmarillion quote above, Helluin, Sirius, Morwinion, Arcturus, and Borgel, Aldebaran, and compares them to the other attested star-like celestial objects in the table, one will find that all are brighter than the first magnitude, thus buttressing the importance by brightness idea. And then
Okay.
magnitude is a logarithmic scale. Well, actually, it's a power series scale, but you can think of it as logarithmic. That list how many times brighter than as the scale goes up, the brightness goes down. So, for example, a first magnitude star is much brighter than the sixth magnitude. Sixth magnitude is about as dim as humans can see on a very dark night, away from any cities or light pollution.
I
Those are
see.
the dimmest stars you can see.
Okay.
Uh, Now, there's some biological variability. Some people who have exceptional vision might be able to see, like to the seventh magnitude or something, but that's rare. Um, and aside from the sun and moon, there remain two celestial objects appearing elsewhere within the Legendarium text, which have unique characteristics and special significance within it. A Arundel ship, Vingolote, which we know as Venus, and Remirath, the netted stars, which is a Pleiades star cluster. And then I go into the chapter heading stars most often mentioned in the Legendarium. And the first one is Venus, Gil Estel, the star of high hope. Sometimes referred to as just Earendil, this was the name given to a Earendil ship Vingolote after it became a star, as is told in the Silmarillion, chapter 24 of the voyage of Earendil on the War of Wrath. Now fair and marvelous was that vessel made, and it was filled with a wavering flame, pure and bright. And Earendil the mariner sat at the helm, glistening with the dust of elven gems, and the Silmaril was bound upon his brow. Far he journeyed in that ship, even into the starless voids. Most often was he seen at morning or at evening, glimmering in sunrise or sunset, as he came back to Valinor from voyages beyond the confines of the world. Now, when first Vengiliad was set to sail in the seas of heaven, it rose unlooked for, glittering and bright, and the people of Middle Earth beheld it from afar and wondered, and they took it for a sign, and called it Gil Estil, the star of high hope. And you can read summary here. There's a link to Tolkien Gateway that gives a little bit of the textual history if you don't have the Silmarillion, and it'll give you a little background. We know it as the planet Venus, which appears as our morning and evening star. Beyond its first appearance quoted above, it was also the star that guided the descendants of Earendil to the new land. And this is from Alcalabeth in the Silmarillion, and it's speaking of the very first colonization and early voyages to Numenor. That land the Valar called Andor, the land of gift, and the star of Earendil shone bright in the west as a token that all was made ready, and as a guide over the sea. And men marveled to see that silver flame in the paths of the sun. Then the Edain set sail upon the deep waters, following the star, and the Valar laid peace upon the sea for many days, and sent sunlight and a sailing wind, so that the waters glittered before the eyes of the Edain like rippling glass, and the foam flew like snow from the stems of their ships. But so bright with what Rothinzel, that's the Numenorian name for it, for the same body, that even at morning men could see it glimmering in the west, and in the cloudless night it shone alone, for no other star could stand beside it. And setting their course towards it, the Edain came at last over leagues of sea, and saw afar the land that was prepared for them, Andor, the land of gift, shimmering in a golden haze. Then they walked up out of the sea and found a country fair and fruitful, and they were glad. And they called that land Elena, which is starwards, but also Anaduine, which is westerness, Numenore in the high Eldarin tongue. And most of these things that you're going to see are references either from the Silmarillion or the textual sources. And what you're going to see next, there's a wonderful book called The Friendly Stars. And you won't see it right in the next entry, but I believe that the entry after that. It's written by a lady named Martha Evans Martin, who wrote in the early part of the 20th century. Around the same time, she's older than Tolkien, but a lot of things that were written in that same sort of wonderful, enchanting, animistic style that he used were also used by some other authors around the same time period. So that's some of the quotations you'll see come from that source. And then the next one is the next star asterism we come to is Valakirka, the sickle of the Valar.
Before we go into the Valakirka, let me just read this really quickly.
Okay.
Much later, it is also the light that Queen Galadriel captured in the file that she gave to Frodo, as described in the Fellowship of the Ring.
Oh,
so
right.
when they were talking about Eärendil, our most beloved star, this is what they're talking about.
Right.
And she captured that in the waters that she poured from the river into her seeing vessel, and probably blessed them amongst other things. And she captured the light of Eärendil, which is Venus, into that water, and it helped Frodo navigate to get to Mount Doom, to get the ring destroyed.
And actually, Sam uses to drive off Shelob when
this is true.
He was attacked. So yeah,
this is true. Yes. Okay.
And so now we come
we'll go ahead and start with Valakirka now, the sickle of the Valar.
Valar. This constellation, Valakirka, this constellation is a sickle of the Valar mentioned in the quotation from the Silmarillion that opens this paper. We know it as Ursa Major, the Great Bear, or Big Dipper. Another one of its names in the Legendarium is Burning Briar. Astronomer Christine Larson, in her paper, Tolkien's Burning Briar, an Astronomical Explanation, that's available in the full paper, suggests the phenomena of the Aurora Borealis underlies the second name. The relative rarity of the aurora at more southern latitudes, and their commonly reddish appearance at the same locations, has led to a general belief in southern Europe that the aurora was fires in the north. This has led to widespread fear and awe reflected in the literary record. For example, the aurora is described in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, the Chronicles of Scotland, and the Irish Chronicles, works with which Tolkien is likely to have been familiar. The King's Mirror, a Norse work dating from the 13th century, compared the appearance of the aurora to that of a vast flame viewed from a great distance and appearing as a blaze like a living flame.
It is Christine Larson that I was actually thinking of, that I admire her Tolkien work with regard to astronomy.
Right. Yeah, she's come out with a number of
papers.
Aurora can appear quiescent in form, appearing as a glow or an arc in the sky, or active in the form of bands, rays, or flickering curtains. They can take on nearly any color of the rainbow, depending on the specific emission lines involved. The different colors are produced at different altitudes in the atmosphere, which leads to latitudinal differences in color as well. Red emissions are due to oxygen at the wavelength of 630 nanometers that occur almost twice as high in the atmosphere as the common green oxygen emissions at 577.7 nanometers, namely above 250 kilometers. So what that's saying is the green emissions occur lower in the atmosphere, and because of the tangential line that you're going to get, because the Earth is a sphere. Well, unless you're one of the flat Earth people, but there's a whole Professor Dave explains why the flat Earth idea is fake. Uh, but but what this happened? The reason what is important in this passage is because the green colors appear lower. So the farther you get from the actual northern lights, it's going to shift up into the red because you're looking up higher and higher in the atmosphere. It's very, very similar to what happens if anybody is interested in meteorology and sees weather radar, especially if you live in tornado-prone areas. The further away from the radar, the higher you're looking into the cloud tops, and that's because the radar beams are going in a straight line, and they're going tangentially off the surface of the Earth. So the further away the clouds are, the higher you're looking up, until eventually it goes out basically over the top of the clouds and out into space and can't really detect anything.
It's so interesting that you answered the question that I was going to ask, which is that the northern lights? Because most of the time when we see those in photographs, they're green.
Right. And you're very close.
I was also going to ask if that is that also resonant of the same thing that, like, for instance, when the sun sets, that there is sometimes a green flash right before it sets all the way?
Yeah, it's because the sun is producing a broad spectrum of light. Mm-hmm. It's so bright that we can't. If we're looking at it directly, like when it's high overhead, we're just kind of blinded. But yeah, as it gets closer and closer to the horizon, the higher frequency. In other words, you have blue is the highest frequency, and you go down. Green is higher than red. Red is bent the less. In other words, they call that diffraction. So you're going to have like a reddish background, and then as the sun sinks low enough, its green emissions will appear as kind of like a burst right before the entire sun disappears. So yeah, that's the green flash. You can only see that. You can usually only see that over the ocean, and I've never heard of anybody seeing it from a mountain, but I've never actually tried to observe it from a high mountain either. So it seems possible that it might that might be possible, but I think you would have to be like from high mountains looking over the sea, like in the western part of South America. It might be possible,
or something like that. Wherein, so I think that it's possible, but I would think that like you said, because I lived on the ocean, meaning for the sunsets, California, right. And I've lived in the mountains, and I will say that when the sun goes down in the mountains, it can like have a twilight for a really long time before it actually gets dark.
Right, yeah.
So I think it would depend on a lot of factors to make sure that happened, and plus, like, it might be a particular like line of sight for that to happen, and that would be probably easier to duplicate with ocean than it would be for, anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, well, yeah, and the reason for that is you wouldn't have any large protuberances sticking up into the atmosphere in the very far distance. So if you had like another high mountain range extremely far to the west, you might get part of the green flash hidden.
I think you could get it. Yes. Yeah. Like if it's a valley and then you have mountains. Yeah, I think you could do it too. If they're right up against it, I don't think it would happen very easily.
Right.
Yeah. And just because the proximity of what would be the visualized horizon is not going to be the same. It'll be more like a bowl than a flat surface.
Right.
The way that it appears.
And should I go on or?
Yes. I have it lined up with reference to the asterism's sickle shape.
Sickle shape. Yeah. The reason it's called the sickle of the Valar, if you there are, I'll do a little background setup for this. There's two types of motion going on over large time scales with regard to the stars you can see in the sky. One is called precession of the equinoxes, which now called axial precession, but I think the old term precession of the equinoxes is more descriptive of what's happening. Are the section of the sky that our axis of rotation, our north and south poles, are aiming at changes over about 26,000 years, and that's because the Earth is wobbling.
Yes,
It's not just straight up and down and spinning. If
correct.
it were, we would have basically no seasonal variation. But since it's at a tilt, we do. We do it every year as we go around the sun. But we also the axis, the part of the sky that the north celestial pole is pointing at changes very slightly from year to year, and it makes a complete circle in about 26,000 years. It's a little
Right.
bit less than that. I would have to look it up to get the exact value. Plus, it keeps changing a
Oh,
little bit
yeah. And
because
even
the
then, I
measurements
think
become
that
more
there's a
accurate.
lot of
Yeah,
there's a lot of opinions about
right,
how long it actually is versus how
right,
long it isn't, and when it stopped. When
right,
was the last period
right,
of that particular slice of that 26,000
right.
some odd year. All of the things, age of Aquarius, all of these things. For those of you who are not into astronomy or astrology, this might seem like a weird concept, but what you can do in order to visualize what you're talking about is if you take a top and you spin it really, really fast clockwise, it'll start to spin, and for a time it'll be straight up and down, but as it keeps spinning, it'll have a wobble that goes
Exactly,
counterclockwise. So it's spinning really fast clockwise, but it has a counterclockwise wobble. That wobble
exactly.
is what
Yep.
we were talking about with the precession of the equinoxes.
It just were a much bigger top, so it takes
Exactly.
26,000.
Exactly. But like, so that people can understand, because it's actually a
Right.
counterclockwise movement.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I should
Yeah,
have put that in, but yeah. You're right.
it's okay.
Right.
I'm here to help because I'm
Right.
an astrologer, so
Right.
that's the ancient form of
Right.
astronomy. So
Now that's and what that causes is, like, right now, from the latitude of someplace in the northern U.S., like New York City or out in Oregon, something like that. You can't even from the southern U.S. where I am here in North Georgia, you can't see the Southern Cross from our latitude. It's below the horizon. However, because of precession of the equinoxes, the parts of the sky that our north celestial pole is going to point at will change over thousands of years time scale. And back in the ancient days, even as recently, I think it was, I don't remember if it was 6,000 years ago or 8,000 years ago, but somewhere in that range, you could see the Southern Cross from New York State without any
wow.
problem. And that's because the portion of the sky that's being pointed at by our north celestial pole is going to change. So uh, the part that you'll be able to see is going to change, and that's part of the precessional cycle. That's one type of motion. The other type of motion is what's called proper motion, which is the actual motion of the stars past us through space as we all orbit the center of the Milky Way galaxy. That's a different sort of motion, and that's usually things that don't return to the same position.
Right. Right.
And one of those stars, stars with high proper motion, and Arcturus Morwinian is one of them, has a very high proper motion. In other words, it's moving past us relatively rapidly. So it's actually noticeable. Its movement is noticeable if you're looking closely within like several decades time span. Time span. Now, it doesn't move hugely, but you extend it over thousands of years, and yeah, it's going to move noticeably. And so those are the two types of motions that are happening. So, and we also that this second type of motion, proper motion, stars moving through space, that's happening in the Valakirka. The reason they called it Sickle of the Valor, if you precess back to around 32,000 years ago, approximately, uh, all the stars in the Big Dipper that we can see, with the exception of maybe some of the dim ones that aren't really related to it, that are actually in the background, they're called the Ursa Major Moving Group. And they move as a group through space, and that changes the configuration of what looks like a dipper in the distant past, around 32,000 years ago, look more like a sickle. And I have a link to that. If one goes to the site link, and if you click on that in your browser, and go there, there's an animated GIF, and you can see it. I think he takes it back to like 100,000 years ago or something, and then precesses it all the way to 100,000 years in the
Yeah.
future, and you can see the shape change.
Yeah. Very cool. And by the way, just for people that are a little bit not understanding what's going on, this is the public video, so it's the part 1. Part 2 is tomorrow during the day, and we sent out a note to our patrons via Patreon, so check your email box if you are interested in coming, and it'll have the link there, and it'll also have the zip file that not only has this document, but like the longer version of this document, because we're going to be talking about some of the more questionable placements tomorrow. But it also has all the sources for you, okay, inside of the zip file for you to, so you don't have to go digging for them. So Dave went well above and beyond for all of this, and I'm very thrilled about that. So we'll go ahead, and I guess today the various stars of the Valakirka can be used to find the other constellations. We see the Big Dipper roadmap to the northern sky, and then that's where we are right now. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's a useful resource if people want to get into stargazing. The Big Dipper is very easy to recognize. Once you find that, you can use it to find other constellations. So I put that link in there.
Good to know for amateur astronomers out there.
And then the next 4 entries, next 4 celestial objects rise one after another in the night skies of autumn. And this is a quotation from Fellowship of the Ring. Away high in the east swung Remereth, the netted stars, and slowly above the mist red Borgel rose, glowing like a jewel of fire. Then by some shift of airs all the mist was drawn away like a veil, and there leaned up, as he climbed over the rim of the world, the swordsman of the sky, Men of Valgor with his shining belt. The elves all burst into song. Suddenly out of the trees a fire sprang up with a red light. And Men of Valgor is, just to let you know, so you're not in suspense, that's what the constellation we know as Orion with his sword.
Right. So, Remeroth, the netted stars, is known as Pleiades. Borgil is what we know as Mars.
No, Borgil is Aldebaran, the
bright... Aldebaran. Okay,
right,
I always get those two mixed up.
Carnal is
Calantirniel. I know, it's like, yeah. I always get those two mixed up, and I don't know why. It makes no sense to me.
And
sorry about that.
And then I'm using this paragraph from the Fellowship of the Ring to identify those stars. Well, they're actually already identified. I'm describing them. Remereth. This object is not a star, but a star cluster in recent stellar nursery. And I have a link to that about its identification and what it is. Its name means netted stars or netted jewels in Sindarin, and we know it as the Pleiades. Netted is an accurate descriptor, as this cluster contains reflection nebulae, which are apparent in astrophotographs and perhaps the enhanced vision of the Quendi. And there's an end note there. People now, if you have good eyes and you're looking very closely, you can see a little bit of that reflection netting type of stuff. And I give a link to an astronomical forum where somebody's talking about it, which I thought was interesting, because you'll even have some professional astronomers say that reflection nebulosity can't be seen except through a telescope of such and such an aperture. Well, it can if you know what you're looking for,
Very interesting.
And
And just as a side note, I wanted to also tell our audience, because some people may not know of a parallel thing that you had discovered, but I think that it's well worth noting even here in this public video, wherein Remeroth, also another translation could be like the way, or a, like, not a road per se, but like a direction or a way that is veiled. And so it would be like a veiled like path or a veiled way. Interestingly, this path also is resonant of the placement of what Nost na Lothion is, which is the first day of summer. And then the very opposite of that, which would be the first day of winter, is actually where we came up with Quivere Quendiva, because of some scenery in the Silmarillion. So those are in exact opposition in axis. So that is to me, like, so we have kind of a solar calendar, and then we have a lunar calendar, and then the solar calendar in these areas are the only ones that didn't really match like the usual holidays. But then when we found out that Remeroth is in alignment exactly with May 22nd, which would be more like the Elven Beltane, right? Because that'll be the
right,
beginning of summer. The usual Beltane is anywhere between May 1st and then like May 10th, depending on, people's opinions about that astronomically, astrologically. But Remeroth is on May 22nd. And I found that fascinating. Just wanted to say, because there is a lot of cultures in the world that use the Pleiades as like a marker for their calendars. And Morgan Daimler has quite a bit of those types of things on her Facebook page. If you guys are interested, just give me a shout and I'll try to direct you to the page in Facebook.
yeah, basically what just to expand a little bit on what Lisa was saying, on November 21st, the Pleiades culminate at midnight. That is that the highest point in the sky, wherever you are on the planet, at midnight on November 21st. Whereas on May 22nd, the sun is there. The sun is near the Pleiades, which means, of course, you can't see them. But if you know what's going on, it's quite it moves through one. One is front and center in the darkness, and the other, the sun is there during the daytime. So that's what's
Yeah,
going on.
so I've scrolled now to the photo, that really good quality photo of the
Right.
Pleiades, and you really can see the netting of the way that the stardust and some of, I mean, it's very, very interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
And I go on. The Pleiades appear in various places in the Legendarium. The most famous of which is probably the Fellowship of the Ring, and that's the entry I read about. The Rivereth Rising. They are mentioned direct. They're also mentioned directly in the poem Carterian Among the Trees, which is an early Tolkien poem. It's a Lost Tales era. They know the season of brilliant night. They here is speaking of the elves. They know the season of the brilliant night, when naked elms entwine in cloudy lace, the Pleiades and long-armed poplars bar the light of golden rondured moons with glorious face. And that's from Quarterian Among the Trees, which is in the Book of Lost Tales 1. They in the name list, they appear under the name of Sithaloth or Sithaloka in the Gnomish lexicon, a Lost Tales era linguistic document. There's a link there. The meaning of those words seem to be fly cluster. There's also Itzelot. Let's see.
It's a Locte.
Yeah, literally cluster of silver flies. This is my logic working here. This probably refers to a swarm of midges in the sunlight, and I give a picture there. And not what we usually think of as flies, Musca domestica. That is not house flies, but like silvery winged midges.
Yeah. But I mean, it does kind of, I mean, it's resonant to where you could see why they might call them something like that. Yeah.
Right. And if you've ever been near a river lowland or
Yeah.
like a small pond or lake during the summer, and during the evening, and the midges come out, and the sunlight reflects off their wings, and as the sun is setting and the lights dimming. That's, I think, the idea that the Quende had in mind, and why they may have called it that. And now we go to the next entry, Borgil. Name of this star is a combination of the Sindarin words born, hot, red, and Gil, star. It's a star we know as Aldebaran. It rises after Ramirez, the Pleiades, and before Menevlagor, Orion, as is illustrated in this passage, as is illustrated in the passage from the Fellowship of the Ring just cited. Of Aldebaran, Martha Evans Martin, in her wonderful book *The Friendly Stars*, writes, "It is difficult to miss finding Aldebaran if one watches in the region indicated, slightly north of east, during the late September or early October, for the first bright star that rises after Capella. The locality is still more distinctly marked if one chances to know the shimmering light of the Pleiades, which are in the same constellation as Aldebaran, and constitute the one group of stars that is usually familiar to the youth who celebrate Halloween. Aldebaran shoots its ruddy face above the horizon just an hour after the hazy little dipper of the Pleiades has appeared, and the star is then to the east of, and hence almost directly under, the Pleiades. The following of the Pleiades is what gives Aldebaran its name, which means the hindmost or the follower. And the reason she mentions Little Dipper, it's not to be confused with the Little Dipper, of which the end star is Polaris, the North Star. But if you look at the picture again up above of the Pleiades, you'll see it's rather Dipper-like. The brightest stars form kind of like a Little Dipper shape, and you can see that if you're looking at it, especially if it's lower in the sky, if it's rising or setting. So, and then after that, these are basically I'm going just from the description in the Fellowship of the Ring. The Pleiades rise, Borgo rises, and then Menelmukar, Orion rises. The name of this constellation, this is Menelmukar. The name of this constellation means Heaven Swordsman, and it is the constellation Orion. In the Book of Lost Tales, he was called Telemektar, and was said to be the son of Tulkas. He was but just war high when he fought at his father's side against Melko in the war which ended in the captivity of the enemy. In that story, Talmektar had a long sword girt about his waist by a silver girdle. It is prophesied he is prophesied to be present at Daggerath, the Ragnarok-like apocalyptic battle. Orion is only the image of Telemektar in the sky. Varda gave him stars, and he bears them aloft that the gods may know that he watches. He has diamonds on his sword sheath, and this will go red when he draws his sword at the great end. But now Telemektar and Gil, who follows him like a blue bee, to ward off evil, and Varda immediately replaces any stars that Melkor loosens and casts down. Although grieved at the gods' behest, the pine is cut down. What this is talking about, the pine is cut down, in a very, very early story, earlier than the Silmarillion, even its early versions, uh, Melkor, as the later form of his name, he was basically the walls of the world were actually considered to be walls, almost like a city wall surrounding the world was within, and there was nothingness without. And Melkart tried to escape up a big pine, so the other Valar cut it down, and he went over the wall, and therefore he was outside of time and outside of space. It's a very almost sort of aboriginal, worldview of the ancient battle. It says, let's see. Although grieved at the gods' behest, the pine is cut down, and Melkor is thus now out of the world. But one day he will find a way back, and the last great uproars will begin before the great end. And then Gil, that's an elven king who often appears as Ingil later. The passage was named Ingil Gil, but Gil was struck out, and that's from Tolkien's notes. Let's see here. Orion is likely the most familiar constellation on Earth and is associated with the winter season. In the friendly stars, it is described thus: with all its wonders and its beauties, it is not strange that Orion should be one of the most familiar and most admired of all the constellations. It is in the center of the stellar company that marches in brilliant procession across the winter skies. We watch for it between 9 and 10 o'clock in the evening in late October, and our first view is of the curved line of faint twinkling stars that outline the left arm on the lion's skin. And we're talking about the traditional view of Orion now. Then one jewel after another emerges from the storehouse below the horizon until the whole splendid figure is before us. Its arrival is an announcement that the outdoor season is past, that the nights are becoming more and more frosty, and that the gorgeous tapestry with which the autumn hills seem covered will soon fall away and give place to the lovely low tones of winter. We remember then that the juncos came that day. Now we heard them as we crossed the coppice about dark, twittering cheerfully to each other as they settled for the night among the low bushes. And we make a mental note to see tomorrow if the little brown screech owl has moved into his winter quarters in the old catalpa tree across the road. I love the way she writes because and it's actually called the Friendly Stars. It's about forming an animistic, friendly type relationship with the stars rather than just observing them as scientific objects. So I really love the way she writes. Um, let's see
Yeah.
here. And then the last one, which rises the last because it's furthest, it's south of the celestial equator, and that's Helluin, which is Sirius. This star, whose name means ice blue, shone at the awakening of the Quende in Cuevienen, as is told in the paragraph in the Silmarillion immediately following the one presented at the beginning of this chapter, which I'll give here. It is told that even as Varda ended her labors, and they were long, when first Menomolkar strode up the sky, and the blue fire of Helluin flickered in the mists above the borders of the world, in that hour the children of earth awoke, the firstborn of Iluvatar. By the starlit mirror of Cuevienen, water of awakening, they rose from the sleep of Iluvatar, and while they dwelt yet silent by Cuevienen, their eyes beheld first of all things the stars of heaven. Therefore they have ever loved the starlight, and have revered Varda Elantare above all the Velar. We know the star is Sirius, the brightest star in our night sky. In her book, The Friendly Stars, the appearance of the sky at this time of year is depicted so. When we begin to look for Sirius in the evening sky about the middle of November, which time it rises about 10 o'clock, the real activity of the year is over. No flowers are in bloom, save that here and there in some sheltered sunny spot in the coppice, a belated aster is cheerfully swinging its bright blue starred branches, or some other flower whose season is long past has been enticed by the warm sunshine into showing yet one more blossom. To be sure, the witch hazel, the very last flower of the year, which thriftily puts forth in late autumn the bloom for next year's fruit, hangs full of the curious straggling golden threads which constitute its flowers. But it stands bare of leaves, and its empty seed cups are open mouthed as if with wonder and admiration at the success of the explosions by which it has lately peppered the neighborhood with its fruit. What that's talking about, I don't know if anybody's ever grown witch hazel trees or been next to them, but it's one of those plants that have explosive seed pods that actually
Mm.
pressure builds up within them, and then something, wind or an animal rubbing against it or something, it actually explosively bursts open, and the seeds can be ejected up to 40 feet, all the way
Wow.
across the road. The heavy frosts have finished the work of painting the hills, and the rich brown leaves are fast applying their soft winter covering over the yet warm earth. The smooth, clean juncos have been flitting about in merry groups for 3 or 4 weeks, and the lovely Indian summer haze hangs like a soft mantle of gauze between us and the half denuded trees. In the skies, all the others of the bright winter stars have arrived, and some of the brightest of the spring and summer stars still linger to grace the company when the king of stars arrives. No less than 10 of our 15 brightest stars are in view when the dazzling face of Sirius appears. On the eastern side of the heavens are golden Capella, rose tinted Aldebaran, red faced Betelgeuse, fair Rigel, gentle Pollux, and Procyon, the smaller dog star, all fresh and joyous and eager. In the southwest is Fomelo, serene and indifferent to what is about to transpire. In the west is Altair, just waiting above the horizon to witness the event and then drop out of sight. In the northeast are Vega and Deneb, bright and gay and twinkling with almost as many hues as Sirius himself. He comes richly dight in many colors, twinkling fast and changing with each motion from tints of ruby to sapphire and emerald and amethyst. As he rises higher and higher in the sky, he gains composure, and his beams now sparkle like the most brilliant diamond, not a pure white, but slightly tinged with iridescence. It is worth enduring the chilliness of the clear mid-November night at 10 o'clock to see the assemblage of these 11 noble stars with their attendants. For sheer brilliancy, it is surpassed at no other season of the year. And then I go on with some legendary material.
Yeah, that is pretty poetic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Heluin's earlier name was Neluin, meaning bee of azure, and its radiance was said to be part of the radiance of the moon ship's sails. Here's the quotation for that. Uinen wove them of white mist and foam, and some were sprent with glinting scales of silver fish, some threaded with the tiniest stars like points of light, sparks caught in snow when the Luin was shining. And
Oh,
that's
very interesting. So Weenen, for people who don't know, it's one of the pairings of the Maya of the sea. So there is a brother, and Weenen is the one that calms the brother. And right now, I'm not recalling his name. I used to know it really well. But they are Maiar that are aligned with Ulmo because they live in the waters.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uinen and Oise.
Oh, that's right. Ose
Right.
and Weenen.
Right.
That's right.
Right.
Ose. And Ose would cause the storms, and Weenen would calm the waters again.
Right.
So just so that you guys know who she is in this story. So here's the end, and the note is those interested in reading more of Martha Evan Martin's animistic style of description can find both her The Friendly Stars and The Ways of the Planets Here and Here, which are both links, and both are works are now out of copyright. So I'm going to just put the for our vision impaired, or I'm sorry, for hearing impaired people, I'm going to allow the footnotes here to be scrolled gently for folks who are looking at the footnotes in this time. So, and I know that the document itself is downloadable, but I thought that I would at least just kind of scroll through and for the record, you know what I mean? Yeah. Okay. So that is the end. And we'll go ahead and end that. And wow, you must have mesmerized everyone because nobody has any questions.
either that or I put them to sleep. I
hope not. Oh, Astrophel says incredible research. Is there Elven zodiacs, or can the stars be applied as signs in that context? So, okay, I'm going to answer at least from the astrological point of view. And I'm going to say no, in that because motion was not other than the motion of the turning of the earth, for the viewpoint of when stars were visible, etc. That's one kind of movement, right? I would not say that that there was an Elven zodiac. I would not say that. And even as the zodiac it is, the zodiac itself uses the names of nearby constellations in order to name those like pie sections of the sky. So there are a lot of people who will tell you, for instance, there's 13 signs because there's Ophiuchus and, they left that out. That's totally false information. Okay, there's always only been 12 slices of the sky, and it just so happens that they are named after nearby, not identical, but nearby constellations. And at one time, they did align even closer when these names were given to those constellations. And then over time, because of the precession of the equinoxes, the tropical zodiac, which is based on when zero Aries happens on March 21st, and the direct rays of the sun shine on the equator, so it's a sun-earth relationship, is about 22 degrees ahead of the, if you will, the sidereal zodiac, which is based on where the first star, I believe, of the constellation of Aries is. Either it's the first star or the middle star, and I can't remember which one. And there might even be two different ones, because I know that Vedic astrology has ideas about which star, like there's a few different systems of the Vedic sidereal zodiac, so that, like it starts at a different place for different people, and then the way that they practice, it's kind of like, well, it's a preference, and somebody finds that, Lahiri's system was good. Some people find some of the other systems that it aligns better. So, and by the way, Muriel says, no, I'm listening, but I'm making dinner because my dad is ill. That's right. I remember.
Okay.
She's still down in South America taking care of her father. So
Yeah,
I do remember that. So sending good wishes to you, Muriel.
To expand a little bit.
Yeah, I am not aware of any Elven zodiac, but I do think that the stars on their own, though, like when their location in the sky at certain times of the year, I think that those things were important, and what it would do is help them figure out what time of the year it was.
Right. In order to have, and actually what astrologers do now, how they calculate. And it took me a while to figure it out, because astronomers and astrologers use different terms.
Yes, they do.
In astronomy, what they're doing would be called equinox of date. That would be the actual term for it. And so the vernal equinox against the background stars is continually moving. But what the astrologers do is they take that vernal equinox point, and then they divide the 360-degree circle up into 12 sections. And so, and then that's called whatever. I mean, it doesn't have to be called Aries or Capricorn. It could be called zone.
It could be, but then,
but what they're
it's
doing,
like it's in the location of,
right,
that constellation. So it totally makes sense that you name it after a nearby constellation.
Well, and during the ancient, like in ancient Greece, it was actually in that constellation, but because precession of the equinoxes, it's moved. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And for astrologers out there watching, there's a lot of, I guess, opinions about, well, why do we use the Earth? Why do we use the Earth and Sun zodiac? Why do we use the tropical chart? Why do we do that? Because they're not even aligned with the constellations anymore. And I will say this, okay? Let's pretend that you lived on a different planet, okay? So basically what it is that it's also about the place that you're born, and you are navigating your life on planet Earth. So it's an external influence. So if you will, it's kind of like you have a sidereal chart that is aligned with the stars, that has like a very deeper, like maybe like even more spiritual resonant meaning, but you're navigating the world with the sun earth aspect, and you're navigating the seasons, and you're navigating, like the moon cycles, etc. So if you will, it's kind of like making a composite chart or a midpoint chart between yourself and the planet Earth, so that you know what you're doing when you're traversing planet Earth. If you lived on another planet, you would probably want a system that is matched up with that. And what it is that the viewpoint of the zodiac is geocentric, meaning from the Earth's viewpoint, not heliocentric from the sun's viewpoint, although that is definitely another zodiac. Okay, from the viewpoint of the sun. So we definitely use the ones from the Earth because we live on Earth, and that's the reason. I think that there is a lot of wonderful meaning to the heliocentric zodiac. There's actually books out there if you're interested in checking them out. That is kind of a really high level of, because the sun, I mean, it's the center of our particular, solar system, like literally named after itself, right? So Vera Tariel says, very interesting. And Sarah Wall says, I'm also listening while making a pearl collar for my mermaid costume. Wow. Okay. I want to see that. And interesting that we would bring up Weenin tonight. So that's very cool. Wonderful.
Also to expand a little bit, with regard to things that the elves may have used, in my lunar month name document, I did a lot of research on that too, and what it became evident during the research that the Quende were probably using the configuration of the full moon around the vernal equinox, the way the sky looked at that time. You can't tell exactly when the vernal equinox is, but you can get within a week or so by the way that the configuration of the sky and the moon position look. And when they were, before they became mathematically oriented, which they were later, Tolkien directly says, I believe the elves observe the stars closely and make occasional corrections to the calendar. That was at a later date, but earlier on, yes, you could get a good idea of when the vernal equinox was happening, and that would suffice for whatever you were doing during the springtime time of year. But they didn't exactly do because they didn't really care whether the bright celestial bodies were moving or not. It's a different world view. So even if later on they could calculate the point of the vernal equinox and whatnot, whether they did anything with that knowledge or not, we don't have any information. So, but the Earth's the Earth Sun Moon system has been around a lot longer than sentient beings have been able to conceptualize things such as
they needed a way to track seasons, right, so that they could grow food, that they could move around, to go to for nomadic types of
probably
tribes.
I suspect the early elves, especially in Silmarillion, are presented as being hunters more than agriculturists.
Yes.
Although there are some that do agriculture, like in Nagathron, it's mentioned in a poem that when Turin was getting close to their dwellings, that they had all basically they knew some stranger was coming in, so they dropped their hoes and stuff that they were doing the agriculture with and ran into the caves. So it was done, but the springtime would have been important for both agriculturists and for hunters because the movement of animals is going to change with the seasons and their behaviors. So I'm sure it was done. It's just a different. It wouldn't be the way that astrological systems are done with humans now. It would have been something else. We don't really have the information on what may or may not have been there. So that's all I can say on that.
And by the way, Sarah, if you cannot find, or I'm sorry, Astrophel, if you cannot find we recently did an update to our calendar, and we have the thumbnail has a large drawing of in Elvish of a calendar. If you cannot find that, I'll try to link it below in the comments here. After I post all of Dave's, updates towards what he wanted to tell everybody earlier before we started. so that you can reference that particular thing. And what you can maybe do is, if you really want to improvise a quote elven zodiac, it wouldn't be a zodiac, but you could probably use the 12 months, like this month, that is ending right now is Virese, and tomorrow literally starts Lotese. So, I mean, you could, for your own, like internalization, if that is kind of what you're looking for, is like, how do I divide up the 12 slices of pie? Well, guess what? There's still 12 months in the Elven calendar. And maybe you can use that for now. It just wouldn't necessarily cross over in meaning to what the actual zodiacs resonate with.
Right. There's one now. I'm also going to cover this tomorrow when we do the patrons broadcast. But there's one essential when you're looking at Tolkien's statements. You have to be careful because he would often speak in a contradictory fashion. He would say one thing one time and almost the opposite thing another time. And there's a wonderful paper called "The Arch and the Keystone" by a Tolkien studies Tolkien researcher named Verilyn Flieger. I'm not exactly sure how you say her last name.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I actually have the. Are you still on Facebook Messenger so I could post the link to it?
Oh shoot! Did I close it out? I'm not sure.
It says you're active.
Astrofell says, yeah, I actually did see it. I didn't watch the video. Okay. We actually totally break down the entire Elven calendar by the month. So we have other work that was done by the Elven seasons because of the solar calendar and some of the things, but we needed a way to track the moons because the full moons are resonant in the Legendarium. And the only way that we thought of naming them was the actual month that they occurred in. And so we used a calendar called the Encyclopedia of Arda for a long time. And then Dave had done like some even digging, research, and thought that it would be better to, actually align like more closely to be where it's like 12 even slices all the way around. Okay. So that it would be less likely for us to have, like the 13th moon or the 13th, like it would hit every now and again. Now, like it would be a lot more rare because of the new calendar. So take a look at that video, like if you get a chance. Let me go over to Messenger because I'm out of the document now, so I don't have a fear of losing that.
I actually posted it in the private chat here.
Okay.
Paper,
okay.
The Arch and the Keystone, and the reason that's important for somebody who wants to do their own Tolkien research, I don't have any problem with it. But the problem that is something to watch out for is you can never take what Tolkien says unless it's an actual data point, like Feanor did this and such. That's pretty much a direct statement. But if the problem I've noticed in the past is people take like interviewers during his lifetime would come up to him and say stuff like, well, I can see that these misty mountains you wrote of are obviously the hills visible out your back window. And he would say, no, you're an idiot. Or the ring obviously represents nuclear weapons. No, it doesn't. But sometimes he would get irritated and he would say stuff to people. Sometimes that was almost the opposite of what his true thoughts were, and that's covered in the Arch and the Keystone paper there from Verilyn Flieger that I posted in the private chat. Lisa
and by the way, I've posted that in the comments, and that will also get into the comments afterward. So if you guys are watching the replay, I will try to get all of the live chat comments that are, resonant into the, yes, he did. And actually, Sarah, she says, Tolkien hated allegory, and that is true. He did.
Right.
But we were watching that Dr. Ralph Wood video that you shared with me about a couple of those other quotes, but I really love what Dr. Wood said, where he said Tolkien, abhorred allegory, but he resonated with like historical, like either association or like a marker, right? Like
Right.
it wasn't,
Right. Yeah.
it wasn't like so literal that it was like allegory. That's not what it was. But there is tones that like have touch points that like, click into your consciousness and tell a deeper story without being allegorical. Where, for instance, I do think that C.S. Lewis was very literal in his, like this meant that, type of thing. Applicability, maybe that's what it is.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Historical
Applicability. Yeah.
applicability, maybe that's what it is. Yeah. I just remember I was like, yeah. So, yeah, so I'll be putting I'll group the comments that were in the live chat for down below, because for some reason, some people, when they get the replay, they can see the live chat replay. Other people, they can't. So I'm just going to put those things in the comments for people. And then they'll be accessible for everybody that watches the replay also. And that counts our patrons, who hopefully will catch the replay before they catch us tomorrow, for the follow-up with all of the research that you did on the quote questionable associations, which Dave, I read the paper already, not to be like a spoil alert, okay, but I think you did a fantastic job. I think you did a better job than anybody else that I've seen. That, like the linguists, they're like, oh, it's this, and they're just, willy-nilly pulling it out of their rear end because they have nothing with astrology or astronomy for that matter. They're just making it up, and so what I think is really cool about what you did was, not only do you know astronomy, not only do you, like resonate, like you broke down the language in order to like really find out what it means, from the linguist work out there, but then you even went into other cultures to see like if there were resonant threads, that could be bringing in something. So this work actually goes above and beyond, and it's pretty awesome, and we're really happy to feature that for our patrons tomorrow, and we can't wait to see you. And in the meantime, I think that we're about done. I was going to wrap up soon. Dave, did you have any last words, or
just a comment to expand a little bit on what you said? Yeah, cultural anthropology is another one of my interests. So I do tend to cast a wide net. If I have a phenomena under discussion, I tend to see, well, what do other cultures think of that? Versus a lot of people in Western culture are kind of locked into Western culture, and they don't even consider other ones for whatever reason. I have no idea what the reason is, because I've never thought that way, but for whatever reason they do. Maybe it's a holdover from the British Empire.
I'll tell you that, I mean, just from studying things that I have studied, like, esoteric things, and, and you just wonder, like, man, how did mankind get so lost? Like, how did we just fall down this weird hole of like forgetting, right? How can we like not know like all of the things that our ancient ancestors knew? And I'll tell you what, like in looking, it could happen in a generation. Like I'm looking around right now and I'm watching a lot of stuff fall apart within a generation. And so it's very easy to see how like we lost a big piece, and then like another generation, you lose a big piece, and it's hard to like regain that once it's lost. And so in a sense, we've been traversing the earth with a lot of lost, energy. And part of what we're trying to do is like bring back some of that, that relationship, some of that sacredness, some of that deep alignment with, not just us as, people, but also, why are we here? Why are we on the earth? Why is the earth like alive with what is happening here? Why are things happening the way they are? Why did we choose to come in now of all times? And I do think that, maybe we are training for some kind of like really big Olympics or something, and we took the hardest school that we could, like the spiritual Olympics, if you will, like, and, we're in a very hard school right now. But, it has to do with, that we're having to recover some of these things through more of our internal sensing. And I think that is what Tolkien did even all those years ago, is that he went into his own abilities to do this. And then because it wasn't in vogue to like really talk about alternative spirituality back then, he did it via story, and it was just perfect the way he did it. And he was still able to really communicate his and I mean, we could say that it's a Christian or Catholic kind of alignment with his morality and ethics, but I wouldn't consider myself either one of those things, and yet I align very closely with the ethics that he shows in the stories. And that's why, to me, the stories and all of the things around Elven spirituality are so, like, I just decided this is my thing, right? Like, and I've studied a lot of paths before. I think that there is a lot of wonderful things in other paths, and I visit them, but I always come back to the Elven path now. It's just so core to who I am. And I think it's because Tolkien had blended that esoteric spirituality with a really strong sense of ethics and morality, that and it's not morality like, oh, I'm so pious and over you, and like, it's not like that kind of thing. And it's not the kind of like where, you imagine this sky god watching your genitals all the time, to make sure you're being, a good boy or a girl, right? Or whatever it is nowadays, it's much more than that. It's about being loving, and it's about being loving to not only ourselves and not only to others, but like of our like this really beautiful gift that we've been given, like life on earth. And I know that it's not easy sometimes, but it's still amazing to be here. And it's amazing to be here now at the crest of something new, because I feel that, and I think that all of us feel that. So I'm gonna be quiet and I'm gonna let Dave sign off for all of you, and then I'm going to let you guys have a wonderful evening, and hopefully we see you guys tomorrow. I believe that it's at 1 o'clock. No, I take it back. It's at 10 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the morning on Pacific time. So that would be 10, 11, 12. That's
my time,
1 p.m. Eastern time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see you then, and you guys have the link. And if there's any questions, like message me on Facebook Messenger or IG Messenger or an email to elvenspirituality@gmail.com, or you can visit our link tree, which I believe I've linked in the description below. And there's a variety of ways that you can reach us. And if any of you guys are interested in becoming patrons and being in our live tomorrow, just make sure that you get a hold of me before we go live tomorrow, because it'll be early in the morning. So try to do that tonight if you can, because I'll be looking at mail and other things. Okay?
Yeah, the full paper is where I go into all the logical reasons and even some intuitive shamanic reasons on why I identified this star or this celestial body with this name. So
excellent. So you guys have a wonderful evening. Laita, many blessings to all of you. Namarie.
Laita.
Laita. Good night, everybody. We'll see you later.